Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks, and welcome to a brand new episode of Bionicle Fanon Reviews, the show where I build and review fan-created Bionicle mocks, creations, whether they're canon or non-canon, and contest winners like this. This is the new Nemys by Lament. This was the main winner of the large category of the Duckbricks Bionicle Dinosaurs of Bota Magna Fanon contest, using a very creative integration of a real-life, human-scale Hordika Vakama mask here. Of course, it is kind of like a large, prehistoric, turtle-like dinosaur. Cannot wait to get into the review for this one because this is a really cool one that is actually really posable and sturdy, surprisingly so. And so, without further ado, let's jump right in to the review. Alright, it's Nemyn time. This is the new Nemys by Lament. This was the grand prize winner of the large category of the Dinosaurs of Bota Magna Fanon contest, and for good reason, because this is unlike any other model that I've personally built for Bionicle just because it uses such unique pieces. Technically this is a official LEGO piece, and also just comes together in a very interesting way that really sets us apart from some of the other entries. When I first saw this, I was so impressed by the quality of the model that I actually went ahead and purchased the mask, which is actually a real-life Halloween voice changer mask, because even though this didn't win, I kind of wanted to build and review it anyways, so I wanted to make sure I got it, and good thing I did, because I seem to have gotten literally the last one available online. With some help from the mock's creator, I was able to locate this, track it down, and get it after accidentally purchasing a small version of the mask first. That was a bit of a blunder there, but I finally was able to get it, and this is really large. So obviously you can kind of tell by the scale that's an actual Vakama Hordika mask. This is a life-size human one, but even just going off of my hand, you can just see how big this is. This is easily one of the largest creations, and it's fitting that this won the large category. But a lot of people might be wondering, well, how exactly does this articulate? How stable is it? How does the build itself function? And I'm incredibly happy to report this may be one of the most stable builds I have ever experienced. If I were to say put a ton of weight on it and press down on it, like, I'm putting a lot of weight and pretty much kind of hammering down on the back, it's not buckling. I mean, this is just a really solid construction, and I would encourage anybody to check out the studio model, which I actually have linked in the description below. If you want to take a look at how the internals of this was built, the mask is not just covering up, say, like a whole lot of emptiness. There is a lot going on, from gear-oriented friction to all sorts of different ball joints providing friction in the legs. I kind of just wish I could remove the mask so you could take a closer look, but actually, you can kind of see it back in there. There's so much going on here where I can move around this part. There's some gears up there. There's another piece of piston articulation, even just kind of moving the legs this way. You can move them back and forth and outside, display them out, kind of like the Witch Doctor legs. And then they actually have this click hinge as well as ball and socket joint hinges to make it even stronger, which is really, really impressive and just goes to show the amount of engineering that went into creating this absolutely fantastic model. Now, there is one thing with the construction I will have to say. Getting the mask on was a big pain, and I honestly don't really know if there's a way around that. I actually had to consult the mockist as in terms of how to actually mount the mask. After I first built it, I just couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. As it turns out, the strap obviously was supposed to go on the bottom here, which I guess makes total sense. It's very, very sturdy, actually. This mask is not going to be falling off, but the strap goes on the bottom, and you have some other stuff kind of wrapping the wires and the internal large-scale Hordika chest on the center here that kind of just sits there. This is not attached to anything, and this is really interesting in the way it's constructed because the mask itself doesn't actually have any connection points. It really is just meant to be a wearable mask. However, it's really sturdily held on there because of the addition of these Technic bars being used to really kind of tightly grasp the side of the mask. This is providing a much stronger grasp on it than I would imagine. It's really, really good how this actually attaches. And then you of course have the strap on the front of the model, which really keeps everything contained. And then of course this kind of internal battery box thing, which is the Hordika chest scaled up, not life size, but scaled up, is just kind of sitting there to provide some bulk to the chest itself. So, of course, I kind of want to treat this like some of the other Fanon reviews and talk a little bit about articulation first, whereas obviously we've been talking for the past 4 minutes on just kind of the overall look and feel and design and building of this model, which I think is worth talking about for a model this unique. Articulation-wise, I'll start off with what's easy, which is the head here. You have a jaw at the bottom, which can be opened and closed, which is really cool. I think this actually just looks really cute and charming when the jaw is open. If you can kind of look at it here. The eyes can also be rotated, so you can have it kind of looking up, looking down, in all sorts of directions, which I think is fantastic. And then there you can see the articulation of the jaw is really great. It's just really simple on 2 ball joints, but it actually is a really good usage of the Fenrac headpiece here, because that really does look like a jaw when it's open, and when it's shut, it really does fit seamlessly with the head itself. So A+ on the head design. This is a really good one in my opinion. Now, the head itself is mounted on a ton of different pieces. The only annoying thing is that sometimes the head can actually get somewhat disconnected. As you can see, it's kind of wobbling around. That's because these pieces here are really only connected by a couple of different Technic pins. Now you can see as we kind of zoom in here, just the way that this is connected, there is really no danger of it falling off. You basically have it mounted on pretty strongly, but it does tend to wobble around just a little bit. Now you have a ton of different CCBS add-on pieces that are the friction add-ons to really keep the head up straight. My only kind of maybe aesthetic complaint about the head is that these feel very, very skinny and not really that well bulked up compared to the rest of the body. You just have these protrusions going out for so long, whereas the head probably could have been mounted a little bit closer. Like if you just removed this segment and had it mounted on ball joints here, I feel like that would have been fine. That being said, because it has this kind of amount of different joints here, you can actually really swing the head all sorts of different directions. So I guess there are pros and cons to this, because you really can get a lot of fantastic articulation. It just doesn't really look all too great, especially when looking at the neck itself. Again though, pros and cons, and I definitely think that this is a really good way of giving it articulation. The head is super well articulated, but I maybe would have traded that just a little bit because it does feel a little bit awkward how bulky the body is, how bulky the head is, and then just how skinny the neck is itself. Maybe the Nui Nemys skipped neck day. Moving on to the rest of the model, the only really other kind of point of articulation here are in the legs, and those are really well done. So I kind of want to again zoom in on the construction of the legs themselves, because you actually have so many unique things going on. You can splay them outwards, you can move them side to side, and you can move it back and forth, so like this with the click hinge. So you really have the full range of motion and articulation, which is really, really impressive for a model of this size. And for it to be as stable as it is, that is really fantastic. And I'm of course very, very impressed with the overall look and feel of the way that the legs are designed in general. Now there is no articulation in the knees, but it doesn't really need it because you have so much articulation on the front joint where the legs connect anyways, and the feet themselves kind of just swing back and forth like this, so you kind of can tilt it back and forth here, and then pivot the foot like this. One note, these are actually supposed to be black and not dark gray. I somehow ran out of black hands building this. You can imagine just how many of them are used here that I actually ran out in my spare parts collection, but yeah, there's supposed to be black, not gray. My apologies, but it doesn't really make that big of a difference in my opinion. Now, the legs all pretty much articulate the same exact way. There's really no difference in the way that the legs move, so you have this moving back and forth here, you can have it splaying outwards, and you can have it rotate and pivot side to side, which I think is pretty much the perfect way to do it. And the best thing is you don't really have to spend that much effort fiddling around the legs to actually make it pose. You really just kind of can move the legs however you want. You can really just position them whichever way you want, and then just plop it down on the ground, and due to the weight, the feet will just automatically splay to the perfect spot on the ground as they should be. So that's pretty fantastic. Oh yeah, and it also has toe articulation for what it's worth. That is pretty cool as well. So the Nui Nemys, in terms of articulation, is really fantastic. The only point off is that it doesn't have articulation in the knees, although I don't really know how it could have been reliably kind of made to have knee articulation, especially because there is so much weight here. I think you may not realize exactly how heavy this is. This is one of the heaviest Bionicle models ever. And it really is a testament again to the engineering that went into building this model, because it is so sturdy and there is so much going on to really kind of keep it firmly planted on the ground, which is just so impressive to me. Moving on from articulation, we can take a little bit of a look at the building techniques, and obviously we started out the video by talking about these, so I'm going to kind of go through these a little bit quicker because we already talked about the amazing way that the legs are attached and the amount of articulation while also retaining stability, and of course the incredible parts usage, which is probably one of the big reasons why this won, which is such a unique parts usage in the mask gear being used as the shell for this creature. But I also do kind of want to talk about the head, where the head was actually one of the most impressive parts of the build to me, even compared to the rest of the body, where it really kind of at times felt like I was building some sort of a Technic mass. It was unclear where things were going. For the head, things just came together really nicely, and I was incredibly impressed by the amount of detail they managed to pack in by still actually having all these features, because of course the head is built up of mostly actual existing Bionicle pieces, from the Visorak carapaces to the Kanohi Hunas. You've got some large Kalma feet and Visorak legs and feet there. All of these are very recognizable Bionicle elements, but then they're combined in different shapes that really make them come alive in different ways. I especially love the way that the Visorak headpieces are mounted at an angle here. They really do feel like eye sockets, which is really fantastic and a true testament to the skill of the builder to really kind of transport you away from just thinking of these as spider heads and instead kind of making them look like they really kind of come together to make the entire head shape. All in all, this is a very impressive head, and I am incredibly impressed by the way that everything came together. The parts usages are the most impressive to me because it retains that Bionicle look and feel. This really does feel like it fits in well with the Bionicle universe, and more on that later, but obviously you still have its own unique visual aesthetic, and it definitely does feel like these are kind of almost made for the model rather than the other way around. Lastly, in terms of aesthetics, and again I did talk about this a little bit at the beginning, I am overall pretty impressed with the aesthetics. The only, again, major complaint is the way that the neck is mounted just feels really skinny compared to what it is and just ends up making the model look a lot flimsier than it actually is. The head itself is in no risk of falling over. It is a very, very stable head, and you would have to really try to actually get this to fall off and disconnect. But it just feels like something could have been bulked up a little bit, maybe even just, I don't know, adding Technic beams to the top here. I don't really know what could have been done to bulk up the neck, but it really just feels very skinny and hollow compared to the rest of the model. And again, I just wish that the neck was maybe shortened a little bit, and I personally would have sacrificed just a little bit of the massive amount of articulation that you can do with the head here, just to have a bit more beefed up neck. Otherwise though, this is a wonderful integration of a actual Bionicle human-size Halloween costume helmet into a model itself. This is really, really large, absolutely carries itself in terms of the weight, is fully stable, and just looks really impressive and visually unique, while still calling back to what the model is actually kind of supposed to represent, which is kind of a turtle-like character here, a prehistoric turtle, I guess. Maybe not quite a dinosaur, but we were pretty loose on the rules of what is considered to be a dinosaur in the contest itself, which I'm very happy we were, because then we get amazing stuff like this. It's kind of just like a prehistoric turtle, or maybe like a beetle-like thing, and you really kind of get that across by just looking at the overall model itself, which is just so impressive and cool to look at. And lastly, I do want to talk a little bit about the realism in terms of actually being able to have this fit in the Bionicle universe, and for that I'll bring over some representative samples. Here is the random Fire Glatorian Akar next to this character. And here is the random fire Agori Ranu as well. So here you can really see the sense of scale of this particular model. The Agoris barely go up to just kind of the midpoint of its head, which are really impressive. I really do like how this truly feels like something you could see in universe. It almost feels like you could maybe make this into a Caravan-like creature, or maybe ride it in some point. All in all, just really good scaling next to the other Bionicle characters. It's not so comically huge that it's unrealistic, but I definitely can see this being a good part of the Magna world and really fitting in with the overall design aesthetic. Despite really relying on something that originated from, say, the Mata Nui and Metru Nui kind of era of Bionicle with the 2005 pieces here and whatnot, this really feels like it fits in well with the world of Bota Magna and kind of the whole Agori and Glatorian lifestyle, just because of the overall design aesthetic and how well it scales next to the characters themselves. Overall, I am very impressed by how it fits in with the Bionicle universe, and obviously it is a little bit of a challenge to talk about this point, especially because there are really no other comparisons to be drawn against any other official Bionicle sets. I guess you have Pharaoh and Skirmix, which is another dark red dinosaur, so maybe I should have brought that, but I guess in general this just feels like it really does fit in well with the overall aesthetic of Bionicle Generation 1, which we have known to grow and love. And with that, we can now sum up the final points of the review in terms of all of the 4 points we've talked about today. So first off, in terms of posability, posability is easily a 9 out of 10. I'm really impressed by how posable the head is, and there were some compromises done there, but you can really get this in all sorts of different poses, and best of all, it holds these poses. There really isn't any risk of things falling off or the head falling off. I mean, this is something that really does hold the poses that you put it in, so that is really fantastic to me. Next up, the legs are really posable despite being very stable, which is really impressive. It was kind of hard for me to tell based on the images of just this mock by itself to really understand just how posable it was. But after building it myself, I was just really impressed by the sheer amount of articulation you actually have in the legs themselves, while still making it feel fully stable and actually being able to stand on its own legs. It's actually so stable that you can literally remove the back leg from the ground and it will still stand. I wonder if I can remove both back legs. That might be a... Oh my goodness. Can it really? Is it really balancing on just... Well, let's see. Let's see if I can actually... Okay, maybe... I bet I could get this to stand... Oh yeah, there we go. One piece fell off. I don't know where that goes. But yeah, look at that. You can literally get this to stand on just the two front legs. And if that is not a crazy feat in and of itself, I don't know what is. For a model this big and impressive, that should not have worked. So that is very, very cool to see just how stable this is now they're buckling a little bit because I put so much pressure on it. Pressure that should not have been on there. But still, the articulation being managed to factor into this model itself is just something that was not what I was expecting whatsoever. It is so stable, yet so able to be articulated that it's just very, very impressive to me the way this all comes together. Moving on to the overall building techniques, I am very, very pleased with this particular model, and it definitely deserved to win in the contest, I think, especially because of that incredible integration of one of the large-scale LEGO Bionicle mask pieces for humans. This absolutely will be getting a 10 out of 10 for me in terms of building techniques. Building this monstrosity was a really cool exercise in just seeing the amount of stability you can give limb joints if you actually have that much Technic internals. You've got gear friction, you've got piston friction, all sorts of crazy stuff happening under the hood, so to speak, and this was just an altogether very impressive and satisfying build to make. The build process itself was very simple and easy. Thankfully, someone actually created a studio model. I do not think I would have been able to reverse engineer this, even with the breakdown photos, so thank you so much to the folks who actually went and created this digitally, because that made it so much easier for me to build, and it was really cool seeing just how this whole thing came together and just how stable the entire build was. And finally, in terms of the last 2 points, aesthetics, I think I'm going to give a 8.5 out of 10, only because of that really skinny neck. That is kind of throwing me off a little bit, just how skinny the neck is. Definitely feel like it could have been greatly improved from that point, and I guess to some extent it does feel a little bit awkward to have to see the wire and the battery box kind of just sitting inside the very hollow mask. There was a really good job done in terms of kind of bulking this up, and one other error I noticed, this is actually something a Bricklink shipper made a mistake on. These panels are supposed to extend out to here. They're supposed to be the longer type of panels for Bionicle. I think the Bricklink seller I got it from just sent me the wrong size, but essentially they're supposed to cover it even more than they cover it now. They kind of extend all the way out to here. I didn't bother just getting new panels for that because, I mean, you can kind of imagine what it's supposed to be like, but even with these extending all the way, I still can kind of see the hollowness in here, which isn't really something you can avoid. It just kind of is a side effect of basing your build around such a large human scale mask. Overall though, the believability in universe is a 10 out of 10. This feels like a Bionicle model. This really feels like it belongs in the Bionicle world, and if Bionicle sets kept getting bigger and bigger, we may have even seen something like this. Obviously, nothing quite like this, because I doubt LEGO would have ever done something with a mask like this integrated into an official set, but you can imagine just the amount of stuff we could have gotten from 2010's Bota Magna Dinosaurs line, and this is a really great one to headline them all. And with that, I think we have summed up this review of the fantastic, contest-winning Nui Nemys by Lament. This is one of the most impressive Bionicle large-scale models I have ever had the pleasure of making, and I cannot wait to bring the reviews of the rest of the dinosaurs to all of you. Thank you so much for tuning into Duck Breaks. I hope you've enjoyed these videos, and be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Bye for now.